So a couple videos back, you might remember I went out to California and shot a video with Brenda over at Smart Art using Jazza's Ultimate Creativity Box. That video was an absolute blast to make, but I didn't really get a chance to really use the materials that were in those boxes. So today... Who's here at this time? Hello? Who are you? What do you want? Oh, hey, it's my package. Neat. Alright, as I was saying, basically today I'm going to be doing the same kind of concept where basically I'm going to create something using the Inky box, creating a sculpture of that drawing with the sculpture box, and then creating a little environment with the minis box. Now, instead of spending an hour or so trying to create these pieces, I'm going to spend a couple weeks making these pieces. So I have a lot of work ahead of me, so how about we get started? So to start off, I had to get used to using this dip quill pen. I've actually never used one before, and I had to find something that would be suitable for the work I was going to be doing in this with the line work. I found that the ballpoint tip piece was probably what was going to work best for what I wanted to do. So to get my idea, I used the Jazza's Arty Games app and got a dwarf mage that has the power to control time who has beautiful horns. I thought this was actually a really cool concept to work with, and it would be easy enough to translate into a 3D piece with the clay when I got to that box. So I did all of my sketching to get my idea down on the gridded paper, and then translated the entire thing over to the cappuccino pad to do the final piece. So using this quill pen, I actually really liked the process of doing the line work with it. It took a lot longer to do the line work compared to just using, say, like a normal liner pen, but this had a very satisfying process. Now, would I use this going forward for all my line work and all my other drawings? No, I would not. It takes so much more time to do it this way, but I have to say it was a lot of fun to do it for this piece. Now, coming into the color, I didn't think about the fact that the ink would reactivate when I went in to add the color, so because of this, I actually had to break into my cheapo alcohol markers and do the coloring that way. The markers I used for this were my set of Studio 71 markers. They are super cheap and don't really have the strongest brush nibs, but if you've never used alcohol markers, these are a great first step. They work really well for what they are, and I'll leave a link for them down below. Like, I have a lot of other markers, but I tend to use these markers a lot because I have the largest color selection of them, and I can buy them for really cheap individually at my local art supply store. Now, the one thing I wanted to do with the color in this piece was to make it a bit poppy. With the robes being blue and pink with the yellow time spell being cast behind him, I thought this piece had a good amount of pop to it. And I'm glad I used the Arty apps for this video because I don't think I would have come up with this really cool idea without it. Alright everyone, the first box is complete and I think the drawing turned out absolutely amazing. I think I pulled off the prompt pretty well, but now comes the hard part where I need to open up the sculpture box and try to make this into a full 3D piece. So let's see how that turns out. So to start off making this sculpture, I made an armature using some of my own thicker armature wire as well as the wire that came in this box. So I decided to make a pretty basic blocked out body with the tinfoil and tape. Since he's going to be wearing a robe, you're not going to really see his chest or legs. This made the building process much easier. The clay I chose to go with in this box was the Cos clay. Since I normally sculpt using Super Sculpey, this seemed like the perfect thing to go with. It feels so much like it. Actually, I did a couple chunks of him in Super Sculpey, so if you can tell what parts I did in Super Sculpey, throw it in the comments below. I'd like to see if you figured it out. I did this mainly for the sake of making sure I would have enough of the Cos clay for the areas like the beard where I wanted a little bit of that flex that comes with this Cos clay, which by the way I find to be absolutely amazing. Having a thing of clay that is also very flexible after you bake it, I break stuff all the time, so having something like this is so much better and it won't shatter every time I bump into it. So to make the robe, I laid out a bunch of thin sheets of clay and then cut them to size. Now this may seem pretty obvious, but if you're doing something like this robe, make sure you're starting from the back layer and going slowly to the front and building up those layers of cloth until you have what you want. You can add things like wrinkles and folds as you're laying down the clay to really make the character feel like it's more alive and not so statuesque. Now this is actually one of my very first full humanoid character I've actually ever sculpted. Other than when I was in grade school and just playing around with clay, but most of those looked like a ball of dough on the sidewalk on a sunny day. I'm not really sure what that analogy means, but I'm sticking to it. But anyways, with this sculpture being one of my first human-like sculptures I ever have done, I will say it turned out pretty amazing in my opinion. Now things like the beard, you need to make sure you have something to give it support like wire or tinfoil. The main reason you want to do this is the beard and hair and stuff like that are not going to keep their shape and form when you throw it in the oven to bake it. Now you may have noticed some of the color differences when I'm adding on clay to some of these areas, and that's because I've actually pre-baked sections when I'm done with them. I do this to give me something a little bit more solid to work on top of, and two, so I don't ruin any of the details in the sculpture. Areas like the face where I put a lot of time into the details, I don't want to ruin that. Just make sure before you pre-bake something that you are 100% sure you are done with adding details, because once you throw it in the oven, that's it for that part. Now I saved the painting for this piece for the final box, since that paint has all the stuff for the minis in there, so make sure you stick around for that part as well. Alright everyone, box number 2 is complete and the sculpture looks absolutely amazing. I'm so happy with how everything is turning out right now, and this guy needs a place to live now. So I'm going to go spray him with a base coat of primer, and then while that's drying, I am going to crack into the Jazza's mini box so I can finally paint this guy and then get a little environment for him to live in. So let's get to that. So the first thing I want to say is I really love the paints that were in this box. The paints here lay out really well and dry with a really nice matte finish. The one thing to keep in mind is that you will probably need to put on 2 layers of paint, at least if you don't use the primer provided in the box. I'm not sure if it's any different if you do it that way, but I didn't want to waste all the primer on this piece because at some point I want to do some of the miniatures in this box. Another thing I want to say is, oh my gosh, this wet palette is amazing. I have never actually properly used a wet palette before, and this thing's so cool. Having the ability to keep your paints from drying right away is such a nice thing to have. As well as all of that, the color selection in this paint set is perfect for doing characters. It has a range of really bright colors as well as a little bit more muted colors that work perfect for things like skin and leather and things like that. It also comes with a pre-made wash which you can apply to your piece when you're done, and I thought it was pretty cool. It's just one less step I have to do when I'm working on pieces like this. And the silver paint in this thing is super shiny. I love shiny stuff. So even though this piece is much bigger than the minis, I did tend to do a lot of my painting with the finer tip brushes. It really helped with getting into the folds of the clothing and hands. I tend to be pretty messy sometimes when I am working on painting and sculptures, so I did my best to be pretty clean and take my time with these small brushes on this. And I am pretty proud of myself because I actually managed to do a pretty good job in keeping the paints in the areas I wanted. Well, at least for the most part. Now, one thing you don't want to forget when you're making a piece like this is to dry brush some highlights onto your piece. Doing this can really bring a lot of depth into your piece, and it's actually one of my favorite steps when I'm painting sculptures. And if you don't know what dry brushing is, the simplest way I can probably describe it is you basically pick up some paint onto the brush, remove most of that paint from the brush, and then lightly brush what's left over onto the piece. I hope that makes sense. Now, I did 2 sets of dry brushing. I did the main set of highlights that you just saw, and then I also did a second set of dry brushing over the entire thing with yellow to represent the glow from his yellow time spell that he's casting. So when it came to the environment, I wanted to go pretty simple with this piece. I went and found some blocks of styrofoam from some of the gifts I had from Christmas that I kept for a moment just like this. I basically just wanted to make a set of stairs that he's standing on that may be like it's in an ancient temple or something. So I actually used gray spray paint as the base coat for this piece. Now, I normally don't recommend this when you're using styrofoam because the chemicals in the spray paint can actually melt the foam. But that's actually what I wanted for this piece. I wanted to make it look a little bit more like crumbling stone. And then after that, I basically just went in and painted in all the stuff that I wanted to be on there, like these shadows and the spell, and then added some grass to finish it all off. Alright everyone, all 3 boxes are all done, and I believe we have an awesome set of art here that we took from 2D all the way to 3D. It was so much fun just sitting down and really getting to use these materials. At some point, I'm going to have to make one of those miniatures, at least just for myself. Those look like they're going to be a lot of fun, and I've never done a miniature before. But anyways, thank you so much for watching, and I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Thank you, Smart Art, and thank you, Jazza, for having me be part of some of this stuff for this box. It was an absolute blast, and I can't thank you guys enough. But if you enjoyed this video, make sure you throw a like down below, and maybe check out some of my other videos. But like always, keep drawing, and until next time, bye.